The blood on Willa Montgomery's hands had long since dried when she stumbled into Naco, Arizona on a sweltering August afternoon in 1882. But she could still feel its phantom warmth against her palms. The stage from Tucson had deposited her at the edge of town with nothing but a carpet bag containing 2 dresses, a Bible she could not bring herself to open, and enough money to survive maybe 3 weeks if she was careful. She had not expected to find work so quickly, but the saloon owner, a weathered woman named Martha Crane, took one look at her hollow eyes and hired her on the spot to serve drinks and keep the books. Martha did not ask questions, and Willa did not volunteer answers. The cowboy first walked through those saloon doors on a Tuesday evening, when the Arizona heat had finally broken enough for men to venture inside without drowning in their own sweat. Willa noticed him immediately because he was different from the usual crowd of miners, drifters, and ranch hands who spent their wages on whiskey and card games. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked like they had worked every day of his life. His dark hair needed cutting, and his jaw was covered in several days of stubble, but his eyes were what caught her attention. They were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the desert, and they held a gentleness that seemed incongruous with his size and obvious strength. "Whiskey," he said when she approached his table, his voice low and rough. Willa nodded without meeting his eyes, returned with the bottle and glass and set them down carefully. Her hands shook slightly, and she hated herself for it. She had promised herself she would be stronger. "Thank you, miss," he said, and something in his tone made her glance at him despite herself. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite decipher, curiosity mixed with concern. She fled back to the bar. His name was Bennett Fletcher, and he came back the next evening and the one after that. He always sat at the same corner table, always ordered whiskey, and always left a generous tip. He never got drunk, never raised his voice, and never joined the card games that inevitably turned into shouting matches. He just sat there, nursing his drink and watching the room with those storm cloud eyes. After a week of this, Martha sidled up to Willa while she was wiping down the bar. "Bennett Fletcher is one of the good ones," she said without preamble. "Works the Franklin Ranch north of town. Been here about 5 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is decent folk." Willa said nothing, just kept wiping the same spot over and over until Martha gently took the rag from her hands. "I do not know what you are running from, girl, but you are safe here. And that man over there would not hurt a fly unless that fly was threatening someone he cared about." "I am not running from anything," Willa lied, her voice barely above a whisper. Martha just patted her shoulder and walked away. That night, as Willa was collecting empty glasses from Bennett's table, she made the mistake of reaching for his at the same moment he picked it up. Their hands brushed, and she jerked back so violently that she knocked over a chair. The crash silenced the entire saloon. Bennett stood slowly, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I am sorry, miss. I did not mean to startle you." Willa backed away, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She could feel every eye in the room on her, could feel the judgment and curiosity and pity. Worst of all, she could see the understanding dawning in Bennett's eyes, and she could not bear it. "I am afraid of you," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The saloon remained silent. Bennett stood there, frozen, his hands still raised, his expression transformed into something that looked like pain. Then he slowly lowered his hands, took several steps backward until he was clear of the table, and nodded once. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will keep my distance." He left money on the table, more than enough to cover his drink and the broken chair, and walked out into the night. Willa stood there, trembling, until Martha came and guided her into the back room. She sat on a wooden crate and put her face in her hands, but no tears came. She had cried herself dry months ago. "Tell me," Martha said, sitting beside her. And because she had been silent for so long, because the weight of it was crushing her, Willa told her everything. She told her about growing up in St. Louis, about her father drinking himself to death when she was 16, about her mother marrying Thomas Montgomery 6 months later. She told her about Thomas's charm in public and his cruelty in private, about how her mother had died of pneumonia the previous winter and left Willa alone with him. She told her about the escalating violence, the black eyes hidden with powder, the bruised ribs concealed beneath her corset. And then she told her about the night 3 months ago when Thomas had come home drunk and angry, when he had grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall, when she had reached for anything to defend herself and found the heavy iron skillet on the stove. She told her about the sickening thud when it connected with his skull, about how he had crumpled to the floor and how much blood there had been. She told her about fleeing in the night with whatever she could carry, about the terror that someone would discover what she had done, about the wanted posters she imagined with her face on them. When she finished, Martha was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Did you check if he was dead?" Willa shook her head. I just ran." "Then you do not even know if you killed him. There was so much blood. Head wounds bleed, does not mean he died." Martha stood and looked down at her with fierce eyes. "And even if he did, sounds to me like it was self-defense. You were protecting your life. The law would not see it that way. I am a woman. I was his stepdaughter. I lived in his house." Martha made a disgusted sound. "The law is written by men for men, but that is neither here nor there right now. What matters is you are here, you are safe, and you are going to build yourself a new life. How can I when I am afraid of every man who looks at me? You cannot. Not if you let the fear win." Martha crouched down so they were eye to eye. "That cowboy out there, Bennett Fletcher, he is not Thomas Montgomery. He saw your fear and he respected it. He gave you space. That is what a good man does. I cannot trust my judgment anymore. I thought Thomas was good at first too. Then do not trust your judgment. Trust mine, and trust time. Watch him. You will see." Over the following weeks, Willa did watch. Bennett came to the saloon 4 or 5 times a week, always in the evening after his work at the ranch was done. He never sat at the same table if Willa seemed uncomfortable approaching it. Sometimes he sat at the bar instead, leaving an empty stool on either side of him like a buffer. He always kept his hands visible, always moved slowly and deliberately, always spoke in that quiet, rough voice. He never tried to talk to her beyond placing his order, but she caught him watching her sometimes. Not in the way men usually watched women in saloons, with calculation and hunger. He watched her the way someone might watch a wounded animal, with concern and a desire to help, but an understanding that approaching too quickly would only cause more harm. Other men noticed her fear too, but their reactions were different. Some seemed emboldened by it, moving closer when she clearly wanted space, letting their hands linger when they passed her coins. Those men inevitably found themselves confronted by Bennett, who would materialize at their elbows and suggest in a tone that brooked no argument that they show some respect. He never touched them, never threatened them directly, but something in his presence made them back down. Willa did not know how to feel about this. She had not asked for his protection, did not want to owe anyone anything. But she also could not deny that she felt safer when he was there. One evening in September, a man named Jack Cordell came into the saloon already drunk. He was a miner, new to town, with mean eyes and meaner hands. When Willa brought him his whiskey, he grabbed her wrist and tried to pull her onto his lap. "Let go," she said, her voice shaking. "Come on, sweetheart, just want some company." I said let go. She pulled against his grip, panic rising in her throat. He laughed and tightened his hold, and Willa felt herself transported back to St. Louis, to Thomas's hands on her, to the feeling of being trapped and helpless. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Then Bennett was there. He did not shout or make threats. He simply wrapped his hand around Jack's wrist and squeezed. Willa saw the miner's face go white with pain. "The lady asked you to let go," Bennett said, his voice deadly quiet. Jack released her immediately. Bennett let go of him just as quickly and took a step back, putting himself between Willa and the miner but not crowding her. "You can finish your drink and leave, or you can leave now," Bennett continued. "Your choice." Jack rubbed his wrist, looking between Bennett and Willa with a mixture of anger and calculation. Whatever he saw in Bennett's expression made him choose wisely. He threw some coins on the table and stalked out. Willa realized she was shaking violently. She tried to pick up the empty glasses from a nearby table, but her hands would not cooperate. "Miss Montgomery," Bennett said softly, "why do you not take a few minutes in the back? I can watch the tables." She wanted to refuse, to prove she was not weak, but her body had other ideas. She nodded and fled to the back room, where she sat on her crate and tried to remember how to breathe. Martha found her there 10 minutes later. "Bennett is covering for you. Told the other customers you were not feeling well. He is actually doing a decent job of it, too. He should not have to do my work. He wants to help. Let him." When Willa finally emerged, the saloon was quieter than usual. Bennett was indeed managing the tables, moving between them with surprising efficiency. When he saw her, he immediately started toward the door. "Wait," she said, the word escaping before she could reconsider. He stopped, turned slowly to face her. "Thank you," she managed, "for what you did. You do not need to thank me. No man should put his hands on a woman who does not want it. Still, thank you." He nodded once, tipped his hat, and left. That night, lying in her small room above the saloon, Willa thought about what Martha had said. That Bennett was one of the good ones. That she should trust time. She thought about how he had protected her without demanding anything in return, how he had given her space instead of expecting gratitude or attention. Maybe, she thought, maybe Martha was right. The next time Bennett came to the saloon, Willa forced herself to approach his table without trembling. "Your usual," she asked, "please." When she brought his whiskey, she did something she had not done before. She met his eyes deliberately. "I want to apologize," she said, "for what I said that night, about being afraid of you. You do not owe me an apology. Your fear is valid, whatever caused it. But it is not fair to you." Bennett shook his head slowly. "Fair or not fair does not matter. What matters is that you feel safe. If my presence makes you uncomfortable, I can find somewhere else to drink." "No," Willa said, surprising herself. "I do not want you to leave. I want to stop being afraid." Something shifted in his expression, a subtle softening. "That is brave of you." "I do not feel brave. I feel broken." Being broken and being brave are not mutually exclusive. He took a sip of his whiskey. "If you want to stop being afraid, maybe we could start with talking. Just talking. You could sit down if you want when you have a spare minute. No pressure, just conversation." Willa considered this. The saloon was not busy yet, and Martha had given her an encouraging nod from behind the bar. "What would we talk about? Anything you want. The weather. The town, what you think of Arizona." It seemed safe enough. Willa pulled out the chair across from him, perching on the edge of it, ready to bolt if necessary. "I think Arizona is very hot." The corner of Bennett's mouth twitched. "It is that." "How do you stand it?" "You get used to it. Been here 5 years now, and I hardly notice anymore." He paused. "Where are you from?" "Missouri," Willa said, giving him the partial truth. "St. Louis. That is a long way from here." "Yes." She did not elaborate, and he did not push. "What brought you west?" I needed a fresh start. She looked down at her hands at the faint scars on her knuckles. What about you? What brought you to Arizona? Same thing, I suppose. Needed a fresh start after the war. Willa looked up sharply. You fought. Confederate sighed, unfortunately. Was young and stupid and believed what my father told me about states' rights and northern aggression. He said it with a bitterness that suggested he had spent years regretting it. Took me until the end of the war to understand what we were really fighting for, and by then I had blood on my hands that no amount of regret could wash away. So you came here. So I came here. Figured I could at least try to live a decent life, even if I could not undo what I had done. They sat in silence for a moment. Willa felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of isolation. He understood in his own way. He carried guilt too. I should get back to work, she said finally, of course. He did not try to keep her there. Thank you for talking with me, Miss Montgomery. Willa, she said impulsively. You can call me Willa. His eyes brightened. Bennett, though I suppose you already knew that. Martha told me. Martha knows everything that happens in this town. He smiled, and Willa was struck by how it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. Thank you, Willa. She nodded and stood, feeling lighter somehow. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a pattern. Bennett would come to the saloon, order his whiskey, and when Willa had a spare moment, she would sit with him. Their conversations were careful at first, skating around anything too personal. He told her about working at the Franklin Ranch, about the cattle drives and the endless work of maintaining fences and water sources in the harsh desert. She told him about learning to keep books, about the strange beauty of the Arizona landscape, about the way the sunsets painted the mountains impossible shades of orange and pink. Gradually, as October turned the unbearable heat into something more manageable, they began to share more. Bennett told her about growing up in Mississippi, about his mother dying when he was 12 and his father becoming hard and bitter. He told her about joining up at 17 because his father insisted, about the things he had seen and done that still woke him up at night. He told her about coming west because he could not stand to be in the South anymore, could not stand the smell of magnolias and pine without remembering blood and smoke. Willa found herself sharing too, though she was more cautious. She told him about her real father, the good man who had loved books and music and had taught her to read. She told him about watching him waste away in a bottle, about the helplessness of loving someone who was destroying themselves. She told him about her mother, about the loneliness that had driven her to marry again too quickly. She did not tell him about Thomas. Not yet. But she could see that Bennett understood there was something she was holding back, and she appreciated that he did not push. One evening in late October, as they sat at his usual table, Bennett said, I was thinking, if you ever wanted to get out of the saloon for a few hours, I could show you some of the countryside. There is a place up in the hills where you can see for miles. It is real pretty. Willa felt her pulse quicken. The thought of being alone with him, away from the safety of the saloon, made her stomach clench with fear. But beneath the fear was something else, a desire to trust him, to push past her terror and reclaim some piece of herself. I do not know, she said honestly. The thought scares me. That is all right, it was just a thought. He took a drink. But Willa, I want you to know something. I would never hurt you. I understand if you cannot believe that yet, but it is true. And I will wait as long as it takes for you to feel safe with me if you ever do. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you care? You do not even know me. Bennett was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. When I came back from the war, I was angry. Angry at my father for sending me, angry at myself for going, angry at the world for being so full of cruelty. I got into fights, hurt people who probably did not deserve it. I was becoming something I did not want to be. He paused, turning his glass in his hands. Then I met an old man named Samuel at a boarding house in Texas. He saw something in me, I guess, started talking to me, telling me stories. He had been a slave before the war, freed when the Union took his plantation. Had every reason to hate someone like me. But he told me that anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. He said the only way to survive what we had been through was to choose gentleness deliberately, every day, even when it was hard. Bennett looked at Willa directly. So that is what I have been trying to do. Choose gentleness. Choose to be better than what I was. When I see someone hurting the way you are clearly hurting, I want to help because maybe that is how I earn back some small piece of my humanity. Willa felt tears prick her eyes, the first she had felt in months. That is a heavy burden to put on me. It is not a burden on you. My choices are my own. I'm not doing this so you will owe me something or so I can feel like a hero. I am doing it because it is the right thing to do. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I wish I could believe that people are capable of that kind of change. Then let me prove it to you, however long it takes. Something in his voice and the steadiness of his gaze made her want to believe him. Ask me again, she said, about seeing the countryside. Ask me again in a few weeks. His face lit up. I will. True to his word, Bennett continued to be patient. He came to the saloon regularly, always respectful, always careful to give her space while making it clear he was there if she needed him. When a rowdy group of ranch hands got too loud one night, he quietly suggested they take their celebration elsewhere. When a traveling salesman tried to corner Willa in the hallway, Bennett intervened before the man could get too close. But he also showed her his gentleness in smaller ways. He brought her a book one evening, a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman, because he had heard her mention to Martha that she missed reading. He taught her a few words in Spanish because many of the ranch hands spoke it, and she wanted to understand. When she admitted she could not remember the last time she had laughed, he made it his mission to tell her terrible jokes until she at least smiled. "What do you call a cow with no legs?" he asked one evening. "I have no idea. Ground beef." Willa stared at him. "That is awful." "But you are almost smiling." She was. Despite herself, despite everything, she was smiling. It was mid-November when Willa finally told him about Thomas. They were sitting at his table on a quiet Wednesday evening, and the words simply came pouring out. She told him everything. The violence, the fear, the terrible night with the skillet, the blood, the running. When she finished, she felt hollow and terrified, certain that he would see her differently now, that he would know she was a killer or at least someone capable of killing. Bennett was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You did what you had to do to survive. There is no shame in that, but I might have killed him. If you did, it was because he gave you no choice. Self-defense is not murder, Willa. The law might not see it that way. Then the law is wrong." He leaned forward slightly. "Listen to me. You are not a bad person. You are not broken beyond repair. You are someone who survived something terrible and you are trying to build a new life. That takes more courage than anything I did in the war. I do not feel courageous. I feel like I am barely holding myself together. That is what courage looks like sometimes. Not being unafraid, but continuing despite the fear." Willa looked at him, at this man who had been so patient with her, who had asked nothing of her except the chance to prove himself. "Ask me again," she said. "About what?" "About seeing the countryside." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Would you like to go for a ride this Sunday? I could borrow a buggy from the ranch. We would stay in sight of town if that would make you more comfortable." "Yes," Willa said, her heart pounding. "Yes, I would like that." Sunday arrived cold and clear, the November sky a brilliant blue above the brown landscape. Bennett arrived at the saloon mid-morning with a buggy and 2 horses. Willa had dressed in her better dress, a dark blue cotton that Martha had helped her press, and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the chill. "You look lovely," Bennett said when she came down, and there was such sincerity in his voice that Willa felt herself blush. "Thank you." He helped her into the buggy, careful not to touch her more than necessary, and they set off down the main street of Naco. The town was quiet on Sunday mornings, most people either in church or sleeping off Saturday night. They drove north, following a dirt track that led into the low hills surrounding the town. Willa gripped the edge of the buggy seat, hyper-aware of Bennett beside her. But as they drove, as the town fell away behind them and the landscape opened up, she felt some of her tension ease. The desert was beautiful in its own harsh way, all ochre earth and sage-green scrub, studded with the occasional mesquite tree. The air smelled clean and dry, carrying the faint scent of creosote. "How are you doing?" Bennett asked after they had been driving for about 20 minutes. "Better than I expected," Willa admitted. "It is beautiful out here. Wait until you see the view I want to show you." They continued climbing gradually until they reached a flat outcropping of rock that looked out over the valley. Bennett stopped the buggy and set the brake, then climbed down and walked around to help Willa descend. She hesitated for only a moment before taking his offered hand. His grip was warm and steady, and he released her as soon as her feet were on the ground. "Come see," he said. Walking to the edge of the outcropping, Willa followed and caught her breath. From here, she could see for miles in every direction. The valley spread out below them, Naco a small cluster of buildings in the distance. Beyond it, the land rolled away toward the horizon, broken by mesas and mountain ranges. The sun was bright overhead, casting sharp shadows and making the whole world seem etched in light and darkness. "Oh," she breathed. "I come here sometimes when I need to think," Bennett said. "It helps to be reminded how big the world is, how many places there are to start over." They stood there for a while in silence. Then Willa said, "I am glad you brought me here. I am glad you said yes." She looked at him, at his profile against the bright sky. "Bennett, I need you to understand something. I do not know if I will ever be normal again. I do not know if I can be what you might want me to be." He turned to face her. "I do not want you to be anything other than what you are. I do not have expectations, Willa. I just enjoy your company." "But surely you must want more than that eventually. You are a young man, you must want a wife, a family. Maybe someday, but that is not something you need to worry about right now." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What do you want?" "Not what you think you should want or what would make other people happy. What do you want?" No one had asked her that before. Willa thought about it, really thought about it. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to stop looking over my shoulder. I want to be able to sleep through the night without nightmares. I want to be able to trust someone again. Those are good things to want, and they are all possible. I want to trust you," she added quietly. "I want to believe that you are who you seem to be. Then let me keep proving it to you." They stayed on the outcropping for another hour, talking and watching the hawks circle in the thermal currents. When they finally drove back to town, Willa felt something she had not felt in a very long time: hope. Over the following weeks, they continued their Sunday rides. Bennett showed her different parts of the countryside. A creek that ran during the rainy season, a stand of cottonwood trees that turned gold in the autumn light, an abandoned adobe homestead slowly melting back into the earth. Each time, Willa found herself relaxing a little more in his presence. She was learning to read his movements, to understand that his size did not equate to threat, that his strength could be gentle. In December, a cold snap hit Naco, and Bennett showed up at the saloon with a new wool coat for Willa. "I noticed you only had that shawl," he said, almost apologetically. Thought you might need something warmer." Willa held the coat, running her fingers over the thick fabric. "It must have cost him a significant portion of his wages. I cannot accept this." "Why not? It is too much, too expensive. It is a gift. Friends give each other gifts." "Is that what we are, friends?" Bennett met her eyes. "I would like to think so, are we not?" Willa thought about it. She thought about the hours they had spent talking, the way he made her laugh, the safety she felt in his presence. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I suppose we are friends. Then please accept the coat. It gets cold here at night and I worry about you." She put it on. It fit perfectly and was wonderfully warm. "Thank you, Bennett." His smile was worth more than any expensive gift. Christmas came, and with it a celebration at the saloon. Martha decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, and there was free food for anyone who wanted it. Bennett spent the entire evening there, helping Martha serve drinks and food, joking with the customers, making sure everything ran smoothly. Willa watched him move through the crowd and realized with a start that she was not just beginning to trust him. She was beginning to care for him in a way that went beyond friendship. The realization terrified her. Late in the evening, when most of the customers had gone home and only a few stragglers remained, Bennett found Willa cleaning tables in the back corner. "I have something for you," he said. "You already gave me the coat." "That was practical. This is different." He pulled a small package from his pocket, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Willa opened it carefully. Inside was a silver hair comb, simple but beautiful, with a small turquoise stone set in it. She stared at it, overwhelmed. "It is too much," she whispered. "It is not. I wanted you to have something pretty." He shifted his weight. "If it makes you uncomfortable, I understand. But I saw it in the general store and it reminded me of you, strong and beautiful." Willa felt tears prick her eyes again. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." But she wanted to say something. She wanted to tell him that she cared about him too, that she thought about him constantly, that she was falling in love with him even though it terrified her. Instead, she said, "I have something for you too. It is not much." She went to her room and came back with a package of her own. Inside was a book, the autobiography of Ulysses Grant, which she had special ordered from Tucson because Bennett had mentioned wanting to read it. "Willa," he breathed, holding the book like it was precious. "This must have cost you a fortune." "Friends give each other gifts," she said, echoing his words. He looked at her and something passed between them, some understanding that went deeper than words. "Thank you," he said softly. They stood there for a moment, close but not touching, and Willa felt the air between them charged with possibility. Then Martha called for help with something, and the moment passed. That night, lying in bed, Willa admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was in love with Bennett Fletcher. She was in love with his patience, his gentleness, his quiet strength. She was in love with the way he listened to her, the way he made her feel safe, the way he had proven over and over again that he was worthy of her trust. But loving him and being able to accept his love in return were two different things. The thought of physical intimacy still made her stomach clench with fear. The thought of being vulnerable in that way, of giving someone that much power over her, was almost unbearable. She did not know if she would ever be able to overcome that fear. January brought cold winds and occasional rain. The saloon was busy most nights with people seeking warmth and company. Bennett continued his regular visits, and Willa continued to look forward to them more than was probably wise. They had settled into an easy companionship that felt both comfortable and frustrating. She wanted more, but did not know how to bridge the gap between wanting and having. One evening in late January, as they sat at his usual table, Bennett said, "There is a dance next month. Nothing fancy, just the community gathering at the church hall. Would you want to go with me?" Willa's first instinct was to refuse. A dance meant crowds, meant being close to Bennett, meant expectations she was not sure she could meet. But she was tired of letting fear rule her life. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I would like that." Bennett's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "Really, really. Although I should warn you I am not a very good dancer, neither am I. We can be terrible together." The dance was on a Saturday evening in mid-February. Willa wore her best dress, the green one she had been saving, and fixed her hair with the silver comb Bennett had given her. When he arrived to pick her up, he was wearing a clean shirt and had obviously made an effort to tame his hair. They looked at each other and smiled. "You look beautiful," he said. "You clean up well yourself." The church hall was already full of people when they arrived. A small group of musicians played fiddle and guitar in one corner, and couples swirled around the makeshift dance floor. Willa felt her anxiety spike as they entered, but Bennett must have sensed it because he leaned close and said, "We can leave whenever you want. Just say the word." They watched the dancing for a while, and then Bennett held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" Willa took his hand and let him lead her onto the floor. He held her carefully, one hand at her waist and the other holding her hand, maintaining a respectful distance. They moved through the steps of a simple waltz, and Willa was surprised to find that she was not afraid. This close to him, she could smell the soap he had used and the faint scent of leather. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, guiding but not controlling. "You are doing fine," he murmured. "So are you." They danced 3 more dances, and with each one, Willa felt herself relaxing further into his embrace. It felt good to be held like this, to feel his strength without threat, to move together in rhythm. When the music finally stopped and they stepped apart, she felt the loss of his touch like a physical thing. They stood at the edge of the hall, drinking punch and watching the other dancers. Martha was there with her husband, a quiet man named Joseph who worked at the livery. She caught Willa's eye and gave her an approving nod. "You want to get some air?" Bennett asked. They went outside into the cool evening. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any light from the town. They walked a little way from the hall, following a path that led toward the church. "Thank you for tonight," Willa said. "I had a good time." "I did too." Bennett stopped walking and turned to face her. "Willa, I need to tell you something." Her heart started hammering. "What is it?" "I am in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Willa stared at him, unable to speak. "I have been in love with you for months now," he continued. "Maybe since the first time I saw you. I know you might not feel the same way, and that is all right. I know you might never feel the same way, and I can live with that. But I needed you to know." "I needed to be honest with you, Bennett," Willa managed. "You do not have to say anything. I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know." "I am in love with you too," Willa said, the words rushing out before she could stop them. Bennett went very still. "You are?" "Yes. I have been for a while now. But Bennett, I do not know if I can be what you need. I do not know if I can be a proper wife. The thought of being intimate terrifies me." "Willa, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "I do not care about that. I mean, I care, but not in the way you think. If you are never ready for that, if you never want that with me, I will still love you. I do not love you for what you can give me physically. I love you because of who you are. Your strength, your courage, your kindness, despite everything you have been through. That is not fair to you. Let me decide what is fair to me. All I want is to be with you in whatever way you are comfortable with. If that means we just hold hands and talk, that is enough. If that means we eventually marry but maintain separate bedrooms, that is enough. You get to decide what we are and what pace we move at. I will follow your lead." Willa felt the tears she had been holding back for so long finally spill over. "How are you real?" she whispered. "I am just a man who loves you. That is all." She stepped closer to him, closing the distance between them. Her heart was pounding, but it was not fear this time. It was anticipation. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble against her palm. He stayed perfectly still, letting her explore, letting her take the lead. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "I do not know, I want to, but I am scared." We do not have to, but she did want to. She wanted to reclaim this part of herself, wanted to know what it felt like to be kissed by someone who loved her gently. "Yes," she said. "Please." Bennett cupped her face in his hands, so carefully it made her heart ache, and lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, almost tentative, asking rather than demanding. Willa felt herself melt into it, felt years of fear and tension begin to dissolve. His lips were warm and gentle, and he tasted like the punch they had been drinking. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Are you all right?" Bennett asked. "Yes," Willa said, and she meant it. "Yes, I am all right." They stood there under the stars, holding each other, and Willa felt something shift inside her. She was not healed, not completely, but she was healing, and that was enough. Over the following months, their relationship deepened. They continued their Sunday rides and their evenings at the saloon, but now there was a new understanding between them. They held hands when they walked. They kissed goodnight before Bennett headed back to the ranch. They talked about the future in hypothetical terms, careful not to push too hard or too fast. In March, Bennett asked her formally to marry him. They were at their outcropping, looking out over the valley, and he pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "I know we have talked about taking things slow," he said, "and I do not expect anything to change if you say yes, but I want to marry you, Willa. I want to spend my life proving to you every single day that you are safe and loved. Will you marry me?" Willa looked at the ring, at his hopeful face, at the vast landscape stretching out before them. She thought about how far she had come, from that terrified woman who had stumbled into Naco to someone who could imagine a future. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They married in April in a small ceremony at the church, with Martha and Joseph standing up for them. Willa wore a new dress that Martha had helped her make, pale yellow with lace at the collar. Bennett wore his Sunday best and could not stop smiling. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed her gently in front of the whole congregation, and Willa was not afraid. They moved into a small house on the Franklin Ranch, 2 rooms with a kitchen and a porch that looked out toward the hills. True to his word, Bennett never pushed her for more than she was ready to give. They slept in the same bed, but he held her carefully, letting her set the boundaries. Sometimes she woke from nightmares, and he would hold her and talk to her until she calmed down. Sometimes she could not bear to be touched at all, and he would sleep on the floor without complaint. Slowly, over weeks and months, Willa's comfort with physical intimacy grew. She learned that Bennett's touch could bring pleasure instead of pain, that vulnerability could be safe, that intimacy could be gentle and mutual. It took time, and there were setbacks, nights when the fear came back and she had to ask him to stop. He always did, immediately, without making her feel guilty. By summer, she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. The thought of being that vulnerable again, of going through childbirth, brought back all her old fears. But Bennett was there every step of the way, attending to her needs, listening to her worries, never once complaining about her mood swings or her anxiety. Their son was born in February of 1884, during a cold snap that had everyone huddled around their fires. The birth was difficult, and there were hours when Willa thought she might die. But Martha was there, and the doctor from Tombstone who had come to attend, and Bennett held her hand through all of it and told her she was strong enough to do this. When it was over, when the baby was cleaned and wrapped and placed in her arms, Willa looked down at his tiny face and felt a surge of fierce love. They named him William, after her father, and called him Will. Bennett was a devoted father from the start. He would wake in the night to help with feedings, would walk the floor with Will when he was fussy, would sing to him in his rough voice until the baby fell asleep. Watching him with their son, Willa fell in love with him all over again. Life settled into a new routine. Willa stopped working at the saloon to care for Will, though she still kept the books for Martha. Bennett continued his work at the ranch, coming home each evening to his wife and son. They were happy in a quiet, ordinary way that Willa had never thought possible. When Will was 6 months old, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Willa stared at it for a long time before opening it, her hands shaking. It was from a lawyer, informing her that Thomas Montgomery had died of a stroke the previous month. He had survived the head wound she had given him, though it had left him partially paralyzed. He had never reported her flight to the authorities, perhaps because doing so would have required explaining why she had run. Willa sat on the porch, holding the letter, feeling a complicated mix of relief and grief and guilt. Bennett found her there when he came home from work. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately. She handed him the letter. He read it, then sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I do not know. Relieved, I think, but also guilty for feeling relieved that he is dead." "You have nothing to feel guilty about. That man terrorized you. You have every right to be glad he can never hurt you again. I spent so long being afraid he would find me. And now he never will. No, he never will. You are truly safe now, Willa, free to build whatever life you want." She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I already have the life I want," she said, "right here." They sat there as the sun set, watching the desert turn gold and orange and purple, while Will slept peacefully inside. Willa thought about the woman she had been when she first came to Naco, broken and terrified and alone. She thought about the long road to healing, about Bennett's infinite patience, about learning to trust again. 2 years later, they had another child, a daughter they named Margaret after Bennett's mother. She was easier than Will had been, a calm baby who rarely cried. Will adored his little sister, hovering over her cradle and insisting on helping with everything. The years passed in a blur of ordinary moments that Willa treasured precisely because they were ordinary. Teaching Will to read, watching Margaret take her first steps. Sunday dinners with Martha and Joseph. The hard work of the ranch and the satisfaction of seeing things grow. Bennett's steady presence through all of it, his gentleness never wavering. When Will was 10 and Margaret was 8, Bennett took a position as foreman at the Franklin Ranch, a promotion that came with better pay and a larger house. They moved into the new place in the spring of 1894, and Willa spent weeks making it into a home. She planted a garden, hung curtains, filled the rooms with the sound of laughter and life. One evening, after the children were in bed, she and Bennett sat on their new porch watching the stars. She was nearly 40 now, with threads of silver in her dark hair and lines around her eyes. Bennett's hair had gone gray at the temples, and his hands were weathered from years of work. But when he looked at her, she still saw the same love she had seen that night he first told her how he felt. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Marrying someone as broken as I was?" Bennett turned to her, surprised. "You were never broken. Hurt, yes. Damaged, maybe, but never broken." He took her hand. "And no, I have never regretted it for 1 second. Loving you has been the best thing I ever did with my life. I could not have healed without you. You would have healed eventually. You are stronger than you think. I just had the privilege of being there while you did." Willa squeezed his hand. "I love you, Bennett Fletcher." "I love you too, Willa Fletcher." They sat there in comfortable silence, and Willa thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. How the woman who had whispered, "I am afraid of you," all those years ago had become someone who felt nothing but love and safety in this man's presence. How patience and gentleness had proven more powerful than fear. How trust, once earned, could build a foundation strong enough to last a lifetime. Inside the house, she could hear Will and Margaret arguing about something trivial, their voices carrying through the open windows. Bennett chuckled and started to get up to settle the dispute, but Willa pulled him back down. "Let them work it out," she said. "If you are sure, I am sure." The arguing stopped on its own a moment later, replaced by laughter. Willa smiled and leaned her head on Bennett's shoulder, feeling perfectly content. The years continued to pass. Will grew into a serious young man who loved books and eventually went to study law in Tucson. Margaret inherited her father's way with horses and spent more time in the stables than in the house. Both children grew up knowing they were loved unconditionally, and both knew the story of how their parents had found each other. When Will married at 25, bringing home a smart young woman named Catherine who taught at the school in Bisbee, Willa felt a pang of bittersweet joy. Her son was building his own life, just as she had hoped. At the wedding, Bennett took her aside and said, "We did well with him." "We did," Willa agreed. "We did well with both of them." Margaret married 2 years later to a rancher's son named James who treated her with the kind of respect and gentleness that Bennett had modeled for his daughter. At that wedding, Margaret hugged Willa tight and whispered, "I want what you and Papa have. I want a love that is patient and kind." "Then you have chosen well," Willa told her. "James is a good man." As Willa and Bennett entered their 60s, they began to slow down. Bennett retired from his foreman position, handing the responsibility to a younger man. They spent their days tending their garden, reading together on the porch, and spoiling their grandchildren when Will and Catherine or Margaret and James came to visit. Willa had 5 grandchildren by 1910, 2 from Will, 3 from Margaret. She loved watching Bennett with them, seeing how gentle and patient he was, just as he had been with their own children. The grandchildren adored their grandfather, climbing all over him and demanding stories about the old days. One summer evening, when they were both 68 years old, they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. Their bodies were weathered now, marked by age and hard work, but they still held hands like they had when they were young. "Do you remember that first day at the saloon?" Bennett asked. "When you told me you were afraid of me," Willa smiled. "How could I forget? It was one of the most important moments of my life. I was so afraid I had scared you away for good. You did scare me, but you also intrigued me, and then you spent years proving that my fear was unfounded." She squeezed his hand. "You gave me my life back, Bennett. You gave me the courage to trust again, to love again, to believe that I deserved happiness. You always deserved happiness. I just got to be there while you claimed it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. The first stars began to appear, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago. "No regrets?" Bennett asked softly. "Not a single one," Willa replied. "Every moment, even the hard ones, led me here, led me to you. I would not change any of it." "I would not change it either." As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, 2 people who had found each other against all odds. Willa thought about the long journey from fear to trust, from brokenness to healing, from loneliness to love. She thought about how one man's patience and gentleness had changed the entire course of her life. Bennett had proven that trust could be earned, that love could be gentle, that a lifetime of patience was worth more than any momentary passion. He had shown her that vulnerability did not equal weakness, that strength could be soft, that the truest measure of a man was how he treated someone who had every reason to fear him. Their love story had not been a whirlwind romance. It had been slow and careful, built on a foundation of respect and understanding. But that patient building had created something lasting, something that had weathered every storm and grown stronger with each passing year. As they finally stood to go inside, Bennett held the door for her as he always did. Willa paused in the doorway and looked back at the desert night, at the land that had become her home, at the life she had built from the ashes of her fear. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Bennett asked. "For everything. For seeing past my fear, for being patient, for loving me when I could not love myself." Bennett wrapped his arms around her, carefully as always, even after decades of marriage. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." They held each other in the doorway. Two people who had spent a lifetime proving that gentleness wins trust, that patience can heal even the deepest wounds, that love offered freely and without demands can transform everything. And as they went inside their home, filled with memories and love and the promise of grandchildren's visits tomorrow, Willa knew with absolute certainty that she was safe, that she was loved, and that she had finally found the peace she had been seeking all those years ago when she stumbled into Naco with blood on her hands and terror in her heart. The story of the woman who whispered, "I am afraid of you," and the cowboy who spent a lifetime proving gentleness wins trust was not just their story. It became family legend, passed down through generations. Will told it to his children, who told it to theirs. Margaret shared it with her daughters, who shared it with their own families. It became a reminder that healing takes time, that trust must be earned, that the truest love is patient and kind. Bennett and Willa lived to see their 70th birthdays, their 50th wedding anniversary, and the births of several great-grandchildren. They remained devoted to each other until the very end, a testament to the power of gentle love. When Bennett finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at 73, Willa held his hand and told him that he had been the best thing that ever happened to her. She lived 3 more years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her fiercely. And when she finally joined him, she went with a smile on her face, knowing that she had lived a full and beautiful life, that she had overcome her fear, that she had been loved completely by a man who never once failed to honor the trust she had placed in him. They were buried side by side in the Naco cemetery, under cottonwood trees that gave shade in the brutal Arizona summer. Their headstones were simple, bearing their names and the dates of their lives. But those who knew their story understood that those simple markers represented so much more. A journey from fear to trust, from brokenness to wholeness, from isolation to deep and abiding love. Years later, their great-granddaughter Emily would stand at their graves and tell her fiancé about her great-grandparents. She would tell him about Willa's courage and Bennett's patience, about how they had built a love that lasted over 50 years, about how gentleness had triumphed over fear. "That is the kind of love I want," Emily would say. "The kind that is patient and kind, the kind that heals instead of hurts." And her fiancé, a good man who had listened carefully to the story, would take her hand and say, "That is the kind of love I want to give you." The legacy of Willa and Bennett Fletcher lived on, not in grand gestures or dramatic moments, but in the quiet certainty that love, when offered with patience and gentleness, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Their story became a reminder that trust takes time, that healing is not linear, that the truest strength lies not in power but in restraint. In the end, the cowboy had kept his promise. He had spent a lifetime proving that gentleness wins trust. And in doing so, he had given the frightened woman who whispered those fateful words something infinitely precious. A life free from fear, filled with love, and marked by the deep peace that comes from being truly and completely safe. Their story was a testament to the power of patient love, to the possibility of healing, to the truth that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust again after being broken. It was a reminder that happy endings are possible, even for those who start from the darkest places. And it was proof that when someone commits to earning trust day after day, year after year, that trust can blossom into a love that transforms everything. The Wild West was often remembered for its violence and lawlessness, for gunfights and outlaws and rough justice. But in a small town in Arizona, in a simple house on a ranch, two people had created something different. They had created a sanctuary of gentleness in a harsh land, a love story built on patience in a time of quick tempers, a healing space in a world that often inflicted wounds. And though Willa and Bennett had been gone for many years, their story continued to inspire those who heard it. It reminded people that no matter how deep the fear, no matter how severe the trauma, healing was possible. Love was possible. Trust was possible. All it took was time, patience, and someone willing to prove, day after day, that gentleness truly does win trust. Their legacy lived on in their descendants, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the lessons passed from generation to generation about what real love looks like. It lived on in the way their grandchildren treated their spouses, in the patience they showed their children, in the kindness they extended to those who were afraid or hurting. The story of Willa and Bennett Fletcher had become more than just a family history. It had become a blueprint for how to love someone who has been broken, a guide for how to earn trust from someone who has every reason to withhold it, a reminder that the most powerful force in the world is not strength or dominance, but gentle, patient, unwavering love. And so, under the vast Arizona sky, beneath the desert stars that had witnessed their first kiss and their countless evenings together, their story continued to resonate. The woman who had been afraid and the cowboy who had proven himself worthy of trust had created something that transcended their own lives. They had created a legacy of love that would endure for generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through force but through gentleness, not through demands but through patience, not through power but through the steady, faithful presence of someone who refuses to give up on you. Their story was complete, their lives fully lived, their love proven beyond any doubt. And in the hearts of those who knew their tale, Willa and Bennett Fletcher lived on forever, a testament to the transformative power of gentle love and the beautiful truth that it is never too late to heal, to trust, and to find the happiness we all deserve.